to our cooking essentials class. I think this is our 4th episode, and today we are not going to be really cooking anything. We're going to be focusing more on knife skills, how to cut things, because going forward we're going to need those skills. I really want to give a shout out to Robin Sally. This week I'm doing all the camera work myself, so she's going to have a ton of editing to do. So thank you for her for all her hard work and for all she does for the club. As with every episode, we start out with questions this week, and we have a couple from last week that I'd like to go over. The first one was, how do you reheat the coq au vin? So generally, if you're reheating anything, I find the best way to reheat something, if you have the time, is to put it into an oven-safe dish with a lid on it, put it in an oven at about 300 degrees, and let it slowly come up. Once it reaches more of a temperature, you can move it over to the stove, but what you don't want to do is, if the oven is too hot, it's going to scorch the outside before the inside of the dish heats up. So lower oven, 300 degrees, lid on, trap all that heat in there, protect it, and it should slowly come up to temp. You can increase the temperature if you need to, 350. You go any more above that, and you're really risking burning the dish. The second question was, what happens if my sauce isn't thick enough after I use a roux? And this is in regards to, well, it could be in regards to the mac and cheese. It could be in regards to the coq au vin. Either way, your best way to fix that is to make a little bit more roux. Start over from the beginning, make a little bit more roux, and then tighten the dish back up by adding your juice back into the roux, and you can do that step by step. The third question was, how do I remove kale from the woody stems? It's very, very easy to do. I don't have any kale in house, but I'm going to show you with a piece of celery. Imagine this is your kale stem, although if you have kale with a stem that big, you're buying the wrong kale. What you want to do is you want to grab the base of the stem, so the leaf would come up here. You grab the base of the stem, and with your other hand you kind of make a circle around it, and you just slowly pull like that, and the kale will come right off. So once again, if you have any more questions, my email address, michela@menlocircusclub.com, and I'm always interested in hearing from everybody, and it's nice to be in contact with the members. So today we're going to be talking about knife skills, how to cut things. And the first thing I really want to do is talk about knives and their importance in the kitchen. It's my number one tool. Obviously, if I can't cut vegetables, it's really hard to cook things properly. There's a thousand knives out there. I mean, in my career, I probably used 1,000 knives, honestly, but there's so many different varieties. But really, at home, you only need 3, maybe 4, depending on how involved in the kitchen you are. The first one you're going to need is a paring knife. Just a small knife with a handle on it for cleaning vegetables, cleaning mushrooms, just small handiwork. You don't use it that much. The second knife you're going to need some sort of serrated knife for cutting bread. It comes in handy if your chef's knife's not very sharp. You can use it to slice tomatoes. Most of what we use serrated knives for here at the club are just for cutting bread primarily. We do use it for a couple other things. And the third and most important knife you're going to need is a chef's knife, and we'll talk about these in a second. If you do a lot of butchering at home, which is rare, I'll be honest, we can go to the supermarket, we can buy our meat pre-butchered for us. But if you like to clean chickens, and that's something we may be doing in an episode here or two, is how to properly butcher a chicken, a bony knife is always nice to have. It's slightly flexible blade. It's a thin blade, so you can get deep into the crevices, get all the meat off, and then but the thing about a bony knife is everything I can do with a bony knife, I can also do with the chef's knife if I have to. So those were the 3/4 primary types of knives you're going to need. There's so many options of knives out there, so how do you know which one to use? And really, the most important thing is that a knife feels comfortable in your hand. Now, a little advice as far as how that knife is going to feel comfortable in your hand. The bigger your hands, generally, the bigger the knife. This is a 250 millimeter Japanese knife. It's around 9 3/4 to 10 inches. My wife, her hands are slightly smaller. She uses a 9-inch, and you could even go as low as 8 or 6-inch. But really, when you get a knife, don't just pick something off the internet. Preferably, you can if you want. Go in, pick it up, feel it, hold it, and make sure you're comfortable with it. Make sure you're comfortable with the weight. Make sure you're comfortable with the grip. For me, in the kitchen, it's super important because obviously I'm using it all day. And when you have to cut 50 carrots, you know, it takes a toll if you don't have the right knife and wears out your arm. So make sure, absolutely, that the knife feels good in your hand. My personal favorite right now, I've used Japanese knives, I've used German knives, American-made knives, handcrafted knives, and right now, and really for the last 10 years, I use a brand called Kikuichi out of Japan, and they've been making, their family goes back, they have a samurai sword tradition, so they've been making knives for 500-600 years. If you like the German style handle, which is going to be the black handle that's slightly shaped, or the Gyuto style handle, that's really up to you. I like this knife. This is a Kikuichi. It's made out of a molybdenum steel, and really it just depends on what you like. There's Swedish VG10 steel, which is super hard, which you can only have factory sharpened. I've used one of those for a while. And it's just, make sure it's comfortable, make sure you like it, and it's gonna make things a lot easier. Make sure it's the right size. So let's talk about the makeup of a knife. And this is, I'll show the relevance in just a second. Really, we wanna talk about the blade. Japanese style knives are primarily single bevel knives. And what that means is, if the tip of the knife, one side is slanted in, and the other side is flat. So this is going to be the tip of your knife. And usually that tilt is about 15 degrees. European or American style knives are going to be what's called a double bevel knife, which means the tip of the blade is going to come to a point like this, and that's around 18 to 25% bevel. This knife here, the one that I prefer to use right now, it is called a 70-30 single bevel knife, and what that means is 70% of the edge is on one side and 30% is on the other. And for me, it just seems to work best as far as cutting vegetables as an all-around good knife. What's important is how you hold your knife. This is a lighter knife. It's very important when you hold it that you are not putting your finger over the top of the blade. The more hand you have on the handle, the more control you have. So what I usually do is when I'm cutting is I will choke up. If you notice my hand, I have one finger that goes over the blade and partially around the handle, and the other 3 are on the handle, and my thumb is on the other side. And that gives me maximum control. If I have one finger on top, there's more movement in that knife, there's less control over it, and there's more chance of an accident. So, we know how to hold a knife. Now we're going to talk about sharpening your knives, or steeling your knives, actually, to be more precise. Steeling is important. You want to steel your knives because what happens is, let's talk about a double bevel knife. That knife comes to a tip, and the more you use it, it starts to bend a little bit, like this. And what steeling does, running it on a steel, it doesn't really sharpen the knife, it straightens that tip back out so that you have a clean edge. So when you steel, a lot of people, you'll see it do it this way. At home, I don't know if that's really the best way without a lot of practice. put your knife down on your cutting board, take your knife, and if it is a Japanese knife, you want about a 15 degree. If it's a German knife, you want about 20 degrees. And you're just gonna start at the bottom and pull the knife towards you like this and keep going. Now, if it's a Western style double bevel knife, you wanna do equal amounts on both sides. If it's a single bevel Japanese style knife, you're gonna do most of it on the 70 side, and then you want one run on the 30. You see a lot of people doing funky angles, going crazy. It doesn't really work, and really it's just dulling the knife. So we've gone over how to hold a knife. We've gone over how to steal a knife, what a knife is. I want to talk about one other piece of equipment I like to have when I'm cutting in the kitchen. And this is a pastry item, believe it or not. This is a bowl scraper. You use it for scraping dough out of bowls. And why do I like to use this? Well, when you're cutting stuff and you want to get it off your cutting board, the worst thing you can do for a knife is to run it across the cutting board. Because cutting boards are they don't feel that porous, but they're fairly porous and fairly rough, and that's really bad for the blade. So when you're done cutting something, and instead of taking your knife and picking it up like so, you take your pastry, your bowl scraper, and you pick it up and put it where you want it to go. It seems to work really well. So now we're gonna move on to the cuts. Okay, welcome back. We're ready to go. I'm just gonna cut a few vegetables today, just to kind of get a good idea of how I do things. It'll help speed things up in the kitchen for you. And so why is size important when it comes to vegetables? The longer you cook something, the larger the vegetables need to be. Because after 45 minutes, a large vegetable is gonna break down completely. And at that point, it just basically clouds the liquid that it's cooking in. I'm referring to a braise. So it's really important to have the right size vegetables for the dish. Texture-wise, you don't want to put a very large diced onion in a delicate pasta, so it's better to do a fine dice or a mince for that. Also, presentation, obviously. Smaller vegetables, consistently cut vegetables look better in a dish. They cook better in a dish. And really, mouth texture as well. When you, let's say if I were to make lentils with mirepoix, and once again, mirepoix is onions, carrots, and celery, I would want all of those to be the same size, approximately the size of the lentils, so they have the same mouthfeel. You don't want to cut into or bite into a crunchy carrot and not bite into a crunchy onion. So you want them all about the same size. We're gonna be cutting some garlic, some shallots, some celery, some onions, some carrots, and if we have time, we'll get into red bell peppers. So let's talk about onions. So first thing you have to do is you gotta peel your onion. And we're gonna try two different ways, and I'll show you why. So onion, you have the stalk end and the root end here. We're gonna cut the stalk end off about 1/4 inch. And then I'm gonna cut through the root end, and that's gonna leave us with 2 halves. From there, I'm going to peel my onion. And this is what we wanna do if we're dicing an onion. The reason being is we want this root end to stay on there so that it holds everything together as we're going into a dice. So if we are julienning an onion, we're gonna take our onion, we'll cut the root end off, we'll cut the stalk end off, we're gonna cut it in half, peel it again, but if you notice, we don't have that root end on there anymore because we're gonna dice the entire onion. So we're gonna start with the simplest of all cuts for onions, and that's called the julienne. What you wanna do is you wanna hold your onion. If the round of the onion is going this way, I have either the root end or the stem end towards me. I'm gonna take my knife and I'm going to cut down through the onion, and if you watch my knife, as I go up, by the time I get to the top, my knife is at a 90 degree with the board. And then I will flip that onion back on its side and start the process. Knife at a slight angle, the same angle the onion's at, slicing through, slicing through, slicing through, slicing through, slicing through. Now, somebody in a question asked me about the knuckle technique, and if you watch the way my hands work with the knife, my fingertips are never in front of my knuckles. They're always behind my knuckles. I always hold things like this. The reason being is, if I only come up with my knife this much, it's never gonna slice through any part of my body, my fingers. But if I have my fingers out there, it's very easy to just pick it up and go into the finger. So yes, I'm a big advocate of the knuckle technique. I believe it is proper knife technique. And yeah, so that was the julienne. And really, if you want the easy way to dice an onion, it would be to julienne and then take those slices and you can dice them up from there. You know, that's a nice small dice. Now that is the easy way. That's actually the way a lot of my cooks do it. I've actually never been very good at it because once you get that whole onion into pieces, it falls apart and you're moving around. So there is another technique for dicing onion, and we're gonna do this was about a small dice here. So we're gonna do a medium dice on that, and that's gonna be about double the size of a small dice. And what you wanna do, you wanna have your your onion flat here, and I'm gonna put my palm here. And I'm gonna put my blade in, and I'm gonna go 90% of the way. And then I'm gonna move it up the same distance from, if you look from here to here, I wanna do that same distance again, and I wanna go 90% of the way. At first, go very slow. This takes a lot of practice. This is 26 years of my life that I've been doing this, so I hope I can dice an onion properly. Take your time, get it right. You will get faster over time. I was amazed 3 years into my career, I watched a chef dice an onion, and I was just watching him, and he was just doing it so fast, and it was so perfect, and it was so delicate that it was absolutely amazing. And I still remember that vision in my head. So we've cut our onion. We've gone about half an inch up, another half inch. Now we're gonna turn our onion, and we're gonna make half-inch cuts vertically, all the way across. And that leaves us with this. Now, advice, make your horizontal cut before your vertical cut. It's a lot easier to make that vertical cut after the horizontal cut is made than vice versa, because if you make the vertical cuts, you're trying to hold all those pieces together as you're moving your knife back and forth. So from here, we're gonna measure out, what do we say, half an inch? We're gonna go down. And if you notice, the tip of my blade is always going down first. And then we'll take this, we'll just trim it up, get the rest of our pieces out. And that's more of a medium-large dice than it is an actual medium dice. But you know, that's probably about the size we use for the coq au vin, maybe a little bit smaller. Practice, practice, practice. Now, the same technique used for onions, used for shallots. So you're gonna clean the shallot. We're gonna take off, I'm gonna take this end off just because it's a little dry. I'm gonna split the shallot. Once again, the stem end is held together. I did not cut that off. And it's all versions of the same process. This is just on a smaller scale. And shallots like to move around a little bit, so you gotta be, you know, do the best you can. And then we're gonna that's gonna leave us with this, which you can chop that up and add it in, but that is your mince. They're all the exact same process, just, different sizes. So that is onions. Now, somebody had asked me about garlic. And there is 1,000 different thoughts. Well, not 1,000. There's really just 2 schools of thought on garlic. Really, how you chop your garlic depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're going to put it in a braise, I would just slice it. But really, mostly, if you notice, I use a lot of chopped garlic. And what you want to do is you want to clean your garlic first and foremost. And then some would say this is heresy because some people believe that I'm working all the essential oils into the cutting board and I'm not going to get them back. But I do smash my garlic and then I chop it from there. I really think that is the best way. And if you want to get it finer than that, what you can do is sprinkle a little bit of salt on there. And then this is really bad for your knife, but work it with your knife, kind of grind it with your knife and the salt, and that abrasive will get it smaller. Really at home, I don't think you need garlic much smaller than that for any of your applications. So that would be a small chop, or that's a mince as well. And then if you want to slice garlic, just take it and slowly slice it with your hand. And that should be good. So sliced. Really, it all depends on your application. Okay, so moving forward, so we have the onions for our mirepoix. We have the mince, the small dice. And this is really a large medium dice, so we're gonna do a better medium dice, and then we'll do a large dice. We're gonna move into celery. Celery is kind of one of the easier ones to do. Just because it's stable and self-contained. So let's talk about the anatomy of the celery stick, and we'll go through we'll do a small dice, and then we'll do a larger dice. So it's really important. Celery is an important vegetable to learn how to chop because this is where you learn that anything you cut, you don't want longer than the length of your knife. So anytime I'm cutting celery, I'll actually cut it in half, and then I'll process it. So celery is fairly easy because decide how big you want it and adjust from there. So if I want to do a small dice, I'm going to do thin pieces, just going through it, kind of the same process as an onion. Turn it, and that's going to give me kind of a small dice. Now, in a restaurant setting, what we would do, so we'd take that piece of celery, we would split it, we would take that little rib off, and trim the edges, because really it's all about the perfection of your cuts. And then that's going to give you more of a square, and it's just going to give you a nicer, cleaner cut. Now, it's nice that I got to this point because this is called a julienne. It's also called a bâtonnet. Don't really see a lot of these. You see a lot more julienne for onions and peppers, not so much for celery. Some for carrots, but once again, once you're in this stage, you can just go for the cuts. If you notice, I'm just kind of moving my hand down as the blade goes. I'm rocking the blade. Take your time. And that is a brunoise. Is actually what that's called. Celery is pretty easy. Like I said, we want a medium dice. We'll take the big one, we'll split it down the middle, and then we just dice from there. Tip of the knife blade should always go down, and then finish. And then for a large dice, technically what is a large dice? I want to say a large dice is about an inch. So 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, full inch. So that's probably about a large dice here. And there you go. Covered most of the cuts. Moving on, carrots. Carrots are a struggle for two reasons. A, they're not stable. And B, you have differing thicknesses along the line. So I peeled my carrot. I'm gonna take the bottom off and I'm gonna take the top off. I always peel my carrots. I think that the outer skin of a carrot has a little bit of a bitterness that it can impart to stalks and stuff. So you have your carrot here. Let's look at the anatomy of the carrot. This huge changes in the degree of thickness here, and not a lot of change up there. So we're gonna split that in half because once again, we want it shorter than our total knife length, and that is, but I like to work with smaller amounts. They're more controllable and you're more consistent. So we'll do the easy end first, I guess. So let's do a small dice. Actually, let's do a medium dice. So when you're working with carrots, one thing you always do, hold it on the ends, 2 fingers on top, hold it tight, and cut off an edge. And that'll give you a nice flat edge like that. That gives you the stability that you need. And with this, you can put that in your stock. I usually end up eating them. And then we could split it down the middle and dice from there. Or if we really want consistency, we're gonna cut it into a nice block. We're gonna trim off all 4 sides, holding the ends, finger or 2 on top, out of the way. And then we can take that nice block, cut it down the middle, find the straightest edge. So this is a bâton. There you go, that's a nice medium dice. Nice, consistent medium dice. So, what do you do with these? Make stock at them. You could take your carrot trim and make a nice julienne to put into your salad. Save them for lunch, save them for a snack. At the club, we use them for stock, or we'll actually take these and do a super fine brunoise, where we cut them super thin, turn them and go back and do it again. So we have a very, very fine dice. There's 100 options. Just try not to waste it. If you don't think you're gonna use it, don't cut it off. I mean, all that means is that you're gonna have a little bit of roundness on the outside of your carrots, and that's okay. I mean, if you're just cooking at home, I think people will just be impressed by the size. So we have the bottom of our carrot, which has a huge change in thickness. So how do we accommodate for that? Couple of options. We could get a couple of big cuts out of the top, but really you have to look at trying to waste as little carrot as possible. So I just barely cut the top off, and I'm gonna do the same process, just a little bit less. And what I'm doing is I'm focusing on getting everything the same size, because I want to be consistent. And you can always trim just a little bit more if you don't get it the first time around. But, you know, that's about the same thickness. And then go through and finish it off. And there you go. So that's our small dice. Or I'm sorry, our medium dice. This is kind of our medium to large dice. Our large dice here. One last thing I want to cover, and that's going to be how to cut a bell pepper. There's a couple of different ways you could do this, but wash your bell pepper pretty well. Any veggies you're cutting, you kind of want to dry them because you don't want that moisture on your hands. And there's 2 different techniques to this. Really depends on what you're going to do with it. One technique is to cut your ends off. You can put an incision here. kind of roll it. Everybody's seen the Ginsu commercials from the 1980s. And then fabricate that. I don't like fabricating large pieces like that. I think it's hard to work with. I'd rather be a little more consistent in the pieces I have to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pepper stem side down, and I'm going to kind of cut down along, and then for this, I'm going to do the same thing very slowly. Now my entire goal was to get this white pith off because that pith is kind of bitter. So on these, I obviously didn't get it bitter, or I'm sorry, I obviously didn't get it off. So I'm going to go back with my knife and I'm going to trim that off. It just has this bitter taste to it. You can leave it on if you want. You don't, it's a matter of personal preference. So what to do with the pepper from there? A couple of options. If you're gonna eat them raw, I like to do a little bit more of a decorative cut. And it's just more, it's a variation of an oblique cut. It's called a triangle cut. And you're just gonna do an angle and then make a triangle and then make another triangle. That gives you some nice triangles that people can pick up and eat if it's on a crudité. If you're doing a julienne, you can julienne this way. You can do julienne this way. You know, they're all kind of consistent. Or you could do a long julienne, or you could do a dice. Now remember, the dice starts with the julienne. So once you have a julienne, you can get a nice dice out of it. Want to go back to carrots really quick. Show you one other cut. And what we're going to do, this is called an oblique cut. And I use this a lot for roasting carrots, parsnips, anything that is this shape. My goal is to get everything about the same size. Move these peppers out of the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. Once again, cut it in half because you have such varying differences in sizes. I'm going to cut it in half again. Now if it's an even bigger carrot, I'll cut it into quarters. I'm going to lay it flat side down, and I'm going to cut it in an angle and then turn it and cut it in an angle again, and turn it and cut it in an angle, and turn it and cut it in an angle, and turn it and cut it in an angle. And that gives me some nice shaped triangles that are all about the same size. So let's do that one more time. I'm gonna about a 45-degree angle to the carrot from the corner. I'm gonna cut, turn, cut, turn, cut, turn, and cut. Now what to do with the bottom piece? So this is a little bit different. You're not gonna cut this in half, but 45-degree angle. You're gonna cut it, you're gonna turn it, cut it, turn it, cut it, and there you go. So those are all our knife cuts. We talked about knives. I hope everybody enjoyed. Please reach out to me if you have any thoughts on what we're doing and anything you'd like to see us do or any questions you have. My email address is michela@menlocircusclub.com. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. And hopefully we'll see you at the club soon. Take care.